Hi, class. So we are going to move on into the topic of feeding toddlers and young children. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we get the PowerPoint going. Throughout the PowerPoint, there are a few links to some websites. You are welcome to explore those. I'm not going to take the time during this recorded lecture, but they're mostly just some links that are, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a little while, they are short clips of different types of toddler behavior. So if you haven't been around a toddler in a while and you need some refreshing on just how they can act, you will be able to enjoy those videos. If you want to see the videos and click within the slides, you have to have your PowerPoint on slideshow view. So you'd go up here to slideshow and then just from the beginning, and then it makes those links hyperlinks, which will connect you. Okay, come on. There we go. All right, so we're first going to just talk a little bit about toddler development and how that relates to eating behaviors. So we talked a lot last time about infants and their need for high dense caloric food that comes in the form of either breast milk or formula. Now we're moving into this toddler phase. So they've really transitioned slowly during that first year of life. Between 6 months and a year, they've started eating more real solid food. It's not all mushy. Maybe some of it still is pretty soft because, again, toddlers aren't going to have a full set of teeth, but they're starting to eat more solids. Their plates look more like the other adults and the other family members that they're eating with. But their development does influence how their eating behaviors look to us. So first, thinking about their physical changes, their rate of growth slows down considerably during this year. So if you recall, infants grow or gain about 50% in height. So if you had a 20-inch newborn, that means by the first year of life, they will have grown to 30 inches. So that's 10 inches in 1 year. There's never a time when we grow so fast. Toddlers from their second year of life, so between the ages of 1 and 2, are going to grow about 2 to 3 inches. So that's like a third or even a fifth of the rate of growth that they were, or the rate that they were growing at during that first year. So it really, really slows down. Well, if your body is physically slower, your metabolism is slower, your growth rate is slower, you don't need as many calories. So you're going to see that influence their eating, because sometimes they hardly eat anything, and other times they eat a lot. We'll talk about that. So their appetite is going to decrease. And again, choking remains a hazard, not a habit, hopefully, but a hazard. And this is also not only structurally, as their esophagus, the tube that goes from our throat down to our stomach, is still small, but also they have less teeth to chew up their food well. So they're swallowing it. If it's hard to chew, they're going to swallow it more in a whole-like form. And just developmentally, they don't really think about how their body is made, what is physically happening, where their food is going, that it needs to go down a little tube even. And so they may just try to put lots of food in their mouth all at once, or they may try to swallow things that don't naturally fit because they're just not cognitively aware of that. Their motor skills, though, are improving. So not only gross motor, but fine motor and more control, right? So we're seeing them hold forks, we're seeing them hold cups. They still need a lot of practice. And if you're giving them cups without lids, you need to just expect a spill. That is something, when we've talked in the past about proper expectations for children, and how we sometimes are easily frustrated at things that they do, yet we've set them up for this problem. That is one example. Expect a mess at the table. Expect them to drop some food off their fork into their lap. There are ways to prevent stains and spills and things like that if we take the time to set them up correctly. But if we don't, then it's our own fault. If those things happen, it's not the child's fault, because we should just expect that at the toddler age. Social development is also changing, right? We know that toddlers experience frequent mood swings. If you watch any of these videos in here, I remember there is one specifically of a tantrum, and that is very frequent. Just simply asking them to do something that you expect is not a big deal can result in, throwing themselves on the floor. Of course, this also varies depending on the personality of the child, but nonetheless, their mood swings are high. They don't have the verbal skills to share how they're feeling, and so they act it out. So if they don't want to do something, even if it's a small request, the way they tell you is not by saying, "That really doesn't sound like something I want to do today, mother." It's, "Ah," and they fall on the floor and they're screaming and they're kicking their legs. And you're thinking, I just asked you to put your shoes on. What's happening here? They also struggle again with that autonomy and independence, right? So they're in that stage. They're trying to become more self-sufficient. They can do some things for themselves, but they typically can't do them well. And so that becomes a real struggle with them. They want to try to do it themselves. They see other people doing things by themselves, and so they think that they should be just as capable, like feeding themselves. Yet then half the food falls off the fork into their lap before they get it in their mouth and things like that. And then it can be very frustrating. So you can't expect patience on their part, but it does take patience on our part. And they're still experimenting when it comes to eating with different textures, with different tastes. It's very common for them to just just spit something out, let it fall right out of their mouth if they don't like the taste or the texture. Use their hands to take it out, right? They can be very animal-like. And again, very messy. Some of these textures and tastes, especially in the very beginning of toddlerhood, may be the first time they've had these textures, right? If you're for the first time introducing a piece of meat and you leave it more, in a small bite, but whole, that's a very different texture than if they've only had pureed meat, right? So you have to think about how a lot of these things are firsts for them. It's not that they're trying to be difficult. It's not that they're trying to waste food or not be thankful for what they have, or these things that we sometimes put on kids. Toddlers don't have any concept of that. And so it's really just a physical reaction. Everything is a physical reaction for them, whether it's emotions or whether it's displeasure of something they've put in their mouth. They do, however, enjoy adult attention and approval. And so this is where we can make the eating time socially enjoyable for them. We can praise them for trying new things. We can act like something is so delicious, yum, yum, yum. We want to eat more of it and we want to share with them because it's so good. And sometimes that can help and sometimes it won't. Depends on their mood. It depends on the moment, what happened right before eating, all the things. So toddlers can be finicky. That's the best way to describe them, I think. And it's just normal. It's all just normal. So now we're moving into more of a preschool school age child and thinking about their development and how that reflects in their eating behavior. Again, their rate of growth is still slow. And sometimes it's even in spurts. So this is where we'll see children that are very, very picky, or not even picky. They just, what I mean is they pick at their food. They just don't act interested in eating. And then the next day it's like every meal they just want to consume more, and you can't satisfy them. And then another day, they'll hardly eat anything. This is really them being more in tune with their bodies than we are as adults. Children, when they don't feel like eating, really shouldn't be forced to, because it probably means that their body physically doesn't feel hungry or in need of those foods. We, though, as adults, have been conditioned over our lives to eat 3 meals a day and to, make sure that they're timed just right, and we get our bodies very much on a schedule, more than sort of listening to our bodies. But children haven't done that yet. And so they actually are really thinking more about, well, am I hungry still? No. Okay, then I'm going to stop eating, right? We could all learn some lessons from that, because typically we just keep eating if it tastes good. And then their appetite is good, but again, they sometimes prefer smaller meals, sometimes putting too much food on their plate, and we'll talk about portions in a bit, but too much food on their plate can actually feel overwhelming to them. And so it can be helpful to really start with just little bit. And then that way, if they actually are still hungry and they want more, they'll ask, they'll let you know, and you can give them a little bit more. But you're not wasting food if it's been on their plate and then you can't use it again. This is especially true in a preschool or a daycare setting, where they can't share food, or where you can't just scrape it back off and save it for later because it's all part of the same family, right? And sometimes you don't want to do that anyway with kids' food, because they've touched it, who knows what they've done with it while they're at the dinner table. Their motor skills. So now at preschool, school age, they're really able to feed themselves quite independently. Still, there's going to be spills. They are still not always aware physically of where their body is, especially preschool. And so you still have to expect and prepare for those spills and be flexible about them. But the good news is they're also capable of helping clean up. And so that's really an important thing, is that, hey, you spilt some milk. Okay, fine. Grab a towel and I'll show you how we clean this up. First, we soak it up with the paper towel. They're going to take a wipe and get rid of the sticky, right? And they can be a part of that process. And it actually gives them some confidence in some of that autonomy, where they can, even if they mess up, they know they can fix it. And they enjoy helping prepare food. So things like those little kid knives that are very dull, and a ripe banana, right? Having them chop that, they think they are like big shots using a knife and a cutting board, and they get to slice it up as much as they want, and then they get to, serve it to everybody or feed themselves, whatever. They can feel really special that way. And a lot of times, if they've helped prepare the food, they are more likely to eat it. You should expect, especially with this age, that they will dawdle. I don't know if that's a common word that you use. I don't know why I put it in here, because it's not really a common word that I use, but it just means to, I was going to say lollygag, but that's even weirder than dawdle. They just take their sweet time. I mean, they can just chew a bite for 5 minutes. They can get distracted. They get up from the table, they come back. This is very common in younger children. As they get a little bit older into school age, probably, I can only tell you what my kids are doing. My oldest, who is 11 now, she will eat her food just, even if she doesn't like it, right? She will just eat it because she knows that's what she's getting. Doesn't mean she doesn't tell me how disgusting and horrible this dinner was, but she will still eat it. And then she just wants to be done. And she doesn't, because she wants to get back to what she was doing. Where my 5 and 8-year-old are still just in that phase of like, I don't want to eat it. And so they just want to sit there, and like it'll magically turn into something else. I don't know what they're waiting for, but nonetheless, they are still in the dawdling phase. They imitate food preferences of others. So this is very true in my house right now too. Somebody asks what's for dinner. I tell them it's not something that they love. So it becomes, oh my gosh, we're having the most gross food ever tonight. Yuck. And then every other child comes to the table with that notion in their mind. Thankfully, most of the time they'll still at least try something. We're not talking about weird foods here at my house. We're talking like chicken. But nonetheless, it's not mac and cheese or it's not a hot dog some nights. And so they are, they've deemed it terrible and disgusting. And then everybody comes feeling that way. Older children are eager to try new foods. So your textbook says. It must mean older than 11 because I haven't noticed that, but every child is different. And I bet some families are real foodies and maybe they try, it's like part of their culture to try different things. Ours is a pretty basic meal plan, and we don't get too adventurous sometimes with food, but so nonetheless, our children are not necessarily eager to try new foods. Although I will say, and this again is dependent on the person, but like my oldest, she doesn't really like a lot of vegetables, but in a soup, she'll eat everything. It's all soft. It all kind of has some of the same flavors. So if she in general likes the flavor of the soup, then she's willing to eat it all. Where if I were to put celery and carrots and potatoes and all these different veggies on her plate separately, she wouldn't want anything to do with it. But in a soup, cooked in the same broth, that works fine for her. But not so much my other two. So every kid's different. So how do we support positive feeding practices, especially given the vast array of ages and developmental levels and taste preferences and personalities, even that has to do, and moods, emotions that come to the dinner table or meal time each day. How do we practice positive feeding? It's really simple. There's only one real rule. It's that adults are only responsible for providing nutritious food and meals for children to eat. That's it. As an adult, my job is to provide something that's nutritious and healthy for my children to eat. Doesn't mean we sometimes don't have something that's maybe unhealthy, because we have those meals occasionally in the week because we want to have fun and we want to enjoy food. And I don't want my kids to think I'm always just cooking healthy, gross food. It's still healthy, even sometimes when it's pizza, because a lot of times we'll make it at home or things like that. But ultimately, adults are only responsible for providing the food. That means we're not responsible for making them eat it. My kids, when they have a meal that they don't like and they really don't want to eat anything, that's their choice. That's fine. Don't. When you're hungry later, you can either reheat your dinner or you can go to bed hungry and wait till breakfast. I know you'll like something at breakfast because everybody likes breakfast in my house anyway. But you're not getting another meal. I'm not going to make you mac and cheese or something that you really love to eat. This is what's for dinner. And sometimes it's going to be something you really like, and sometimes it's not. You got to deal with it. That's just how it is. Our job is to provide something nutritious. So helping to follow my plate is really good because then we're getting a wide variety of foods and grains and veggies and fruits each day. We also want to be mindful of the different varieties, textures, flavors, different colors of food that we provide so that we're not always, picking just the basic bland kind of foods. A lot of things that are white don't tend to have a lot of nutritional value, even though, mashed potatoes and pizza crust and pasta and those kinds of things sometimes are what children want. But the more color and variety we can add into that, the better. But that's really our only responsibility, right? Our responsibility is not to make sure that they love every meal. It's not to make sure that they eat their plate clean and they don't leave anything, right? You're just setting yourself up for a really frustrating experience when you do that. So try to keep that in mind, especially if you're struggling with a picky eater. Your job is just to provide the food. That's it. They get to decide if they eat it. And if you tell them that, hey, it's your choice. You can eat and not be hungry, or you can not eat and be hungry. They'll figure it out. They are not going to let themselves starve. And I mean, again, we're talking about a typically developing child. I'm not talking about a child with special needs that can't sense when they're hungry and when they're not, right? We're talking about your typical child. And when you are giving them a variety, some of that can be, something they like. So if you're going to cook a meat that they don't like and a whole grain pasta that they're maybe not going to eat, or a whole grain, brown rice or something, then maybe you're going to have strawberries on the side because they love strawberries, right? You're not going to always pick everything that is going to be like frustrating to them. We still want the experience to be pleasurable, but we need to provide the variety and the nutrition. And then they get to decide what they eat of it. That's their choice. So again, the children are going to determine what they'll eat and how much they'll eat. We should not be making them sit until they finish their plates. We should not be, having those kinds of expectations. Serving sizes are also important. We talked about this a little bit earlier, that when you give them a lot of food, if you think they're going to eat as much as you do, maybe it can be overwhelming. So their serving sizes should be the size appropriate for their age. And typically, this is, I think, even true for adults, it's the size of your palm. Well, if you think of a toddler or a preschooler's palm size, that's very tiny. If, that might be like 3 strawberries or 4 little bites of meat, maybe, right? We're not talking like a chunk of steak or something like that. So again, giving them the appropriate sizes. They can always ask for more, but then you're also not wasting food. Expect that they will skip meals. There are times when my children do not eat. They are all fine. They're all healthy. They make up for it the next day or at the next meal when they like something more. They can be picky at times. It's all normal behavior. And I cannot take it personally if they say my food is disgusting, because I know it's not, because I'm a good cook. My husband says so. But nonetheless, it's my job to give them the nutritious food. They get to decide if they eat it or not. And avoid letting them fill up on milk. This can be a real problem, especially for those younger kids. When, as a parent, we feel like they're just not eating enough, right? I mean, it does sometimes seem like that. They're just not eating enough. How could they possibly, live off of 3 goldfish in a day or whatever, goldfish crackers in a day? So you let them have milk. And this happens frequently in the hospital, in the ER where I work, that young children will come in toddler age, so like 18 months to 2 years, and they will come in very pale. They are tired, overall fatigued. The parents could tell like they just aren't the same kid. They're very quiet and calm, and they just kind of want to lay around. They don't have the activity and energy level that they used to. And then as the doctors talk to them, they find out that, in fact, this one 18-month-old was going through a gallon of milk every 3 days. That's way too much. They should only go through maybe at the most 6 cups of milk in 3 days if they're having a cup with each meal. But they shouldn't be having milk in between, because that just fills them up and they don't want to eat or be willing to try other foods. And it's only giving them certain nutrients, but their diet is basically void of all those other nutrients. And so what this ends up leading to a lot of times is a nutrition induced, or a lack of nutrition induced anemia. And we talked about anemia earlier on when we talked about childhood illnesses. But this is very common, that their nutrition is what is causing that. And it's has to do with the way your body responds to milk specifically, and too much of it means you're not getting enough iron, because they're usually not eating foods, other types of food that might have iron in them. And so they're low iron. And yeah, we see this very commonly with that toddler age that just want to fill up on milk. So again, palm-sized portions, and avoid just letting them fill up on something that they will eat. They will eat if they're absolutely hungry. They will not let themselves starve. Again, respecting these roles. So the fact that you are the one that is only responsible for providing nutritious food, and that the child is the one responsible for choosing how much and what to eat, really reduces the power struggle. Food should not be like a power struggle situation. You want your meal times to be pleasant, enjoyable, social events, not what feels like punishment. And this really helps children in developing not only autonomy and independence for making choices for themselves, especially what they put in their body. That's very important. And it sets the stage for how they'll feel about that as adults. But also they can trust themselves. They can trust to know, like, my body's full, my body's hungry, and when I should eat and when I shouldn't. You can have boundaries though. Like, don't hear me say that they can just eat whenever they want, right? You can have boundaries. If my kid doesn't eat dinner and I think they're going to tell me they're hungry in about 30 minutes, I'll save their plate in the fridge. And then when they say they're hungry, I can reheat their dinner. That's not a problem. It's not hard for me. If they say they're hungry at 8 o'clock when it's bedtime, too late. You can't eat that late because you're going to bed now. And now you're just trying to delay bedtime, right? So there's still boundaries within some of these practices. It's not that they get to just determine what they eat whenever they eat, and we should just comply to that. There are still rules and boundaries that we put around eating, but we take away the power, we take away the struggle within that. Again, this is important because we're starting to form those lifelong habits that they'll have when it comes to eating. So we want to be the positive role model. If we won't eat a variety of foods and they see that our plate doesn't have any of those things that we're asking them to eat, they're not going to be willing to eat it. So we have to be encouraging to try new foods, have an active lifestyle, because that will encourage them to do it. We can't just expect that they will innately want to do that, because we probably don't innately want to do it either, right? So we have to try. There is some really good suggestions sometimes on, helping your kids try new foods. Sometimes that can be having them go to the grocery store with you and just say, hey, look around and pick one thing that you want to take home today. Just one, right? You don't have to buy a whole bag of it. Just one, no matter how like bizarre it is or weird it is, just be encouraging, and let them pick one thing to take home, and then figure out how to kind of cook it or make it, or maybe you can just eat it raw, which is even better. And then you wash it up and let them have it, or let them help prepare it. Again, assisting with food preparation can be helpful. Trying new things together as a family. So what I sometimes have done is, if I want to try a new recipe that I think will get resistance, I'll say, okay, guys, this is a new recipe. After you try some, you get to rate it. And you can give it a frowny face, you can give it a flat face, or you can give it a smiley face. And then we'll write it in our recipe book, like who picks each face, so that I know, okay, how many of us are actually liked this later, who didn't really like it. They get to kind of voice their opinion, which they like. And then if everybody gave it a frowny face, then I know, well, don't try that recipe again, right? So they kind of have fun with that. If children need help with something like peeling a mandarin or, I don't know, cutting something up in smaller bites, obviously assist them with that. Giving them something that then they have to struggle with is not going to be encouraging or enjoyable for them. We're going to talk a little bit about snacks, but making sure that those are healthy options. And then sometimes children will say they're hungry out of boredom. We probably all do it as adults. But if they do say that they're hungry, try to get them to play a little bit. Like if you don't really think if you really don't think they're hungry, like 30 minutes after they ate a really good breakfast, they're telling you they're still hungry, encourage them to do something. Try to play with them a little bit and get them distracted. And you might find that if they get involved in something else, they magically aren't feeling hungry anymore. Drinking some water. Sometimes being thirsty can mimic or confuse us into thinking maybe we need to eat something, but in fact, we just need some water. So those are some suggestions for helping encourage those eating practices. So there are a number of conditions that are some either directly or indirectly related to how we eat. Cavities, or also called dental caries, those are obviously related to what we eat. When we eat too much sugar, we can end up with more cavities. So limiting sugars and juices, things that really stick to your teeth, especially if your child isn't brushing regularly. They should be brushing their teeth regularly, but even great brushing isn't always going to prevent poor nutrition in terms of how our teeth's health. Obesity, so childhood obesity is on the rise. It's on the rise with adults as well. And there are a multitude of issues that can come with this, from neurological issues, cardiovascular, all the systems. Your mental health is affected by your physical health, and vice versa. Basically every system in our body can be affected by obesity. We're seeing children with type 2 diabetes, which that used to be a late adult, older person's disease, and now children are getting it because of just poor nutrition and poor lifestyle choices. And so that's concerning. High blood pressure or hypertension, cardiovascular disease. Some of these things can even come on in childhood, but it sets that child up to be an adult with these kinds of medical conditions. So it's important that's why we set those positive behaviors early so that we don't see these happening. Diabetes. Physical health. Our physical health is directly related to our nutrition, maybe even more so sometimes than our activity level, but they go hand in hand. And so this is kind of a twist on what used to be the food pyramid, but now we use MyPlate as our guide. This is an activity pyramid. So at the bottom, of course, is the things we should do every day, like chores and picking things up. If you can, take the stairs instead of an elevator, going for walks, trying to just not be sedentary all day. Often you want to do things that are a little more high energy, like dancing or playing a sport, going for a bike ride maybe. Then you also want to, at times, head to a park where that gives you different types of gross motor activities that you can engage in. And then the least amount of activity we should be doing each day is sitting in front of a screen. That is quite a challenge when it comes to online learning environments. But again, as soon as the educational part of the day is over, trying to get children moving and playing outside when the weather's right, those are all really helpful things. So we're going to kind of just wrap up here with talking about physical need, or the nutrition for special needs children. Again, special needs can really encompass so much, from, a food allergy all the way to, a severe developmental delay. And so these are just general guidelines. Of course, you still have to, just like we do with typically developing children, really talk with the family, learn about that child, make sure you understand their needs specifically. But sometimes children with developmental delays or special medical conditions have certain needs when it comes to feeding. One being they may not recognize if they are hungry, or they may not be able to express hunger if there is a delay in their speech or their cognitive abilities. So knowing what their cues are for when they feel hungry is important, and that will come from talking with the family. Some children may have a tendency to overeat. Specifically, I know that, there are some medications that just make children insatiable. They will always feel hungry. And so you have to really, really limit their caloric intake, or they will just overeat to such extremes that it can be very damaging to their health. And that's due to certain medications that are treating sometimes life-threatening illnesses. So it's one of those, really unfortunate symptoms, but nonetheless, you have to be very careful with that. Some children with developmental delays, especially if it comes to their muscle tone, can be more prone to choking, or, their developmental level. And again, cognitively, they're just not aware of, what happens when you put too much food in your mouth at one time and try to swallow it. But if their muscle tone is poor and they're kind of what we call floppy, or just, they can't hold themselves upright, like we talked about with infants, and when they're ready for more solids, they can be prone to choking. Even if they're well past infancy, if they have a condition that results in poor muscle tone, they can be more prone to choking. They might be taking medication that interferes with nutrient absorption. And so there may be an increase for certain needs or extra supplements that are needed. So just being aware of some of those issues. And then an increased tendency towards food allergies with special needs children. But again, everybody is different and many people have food allergies. And so that's, as important as understanding when it comes to children in your care, like if they need certain medications, knowing if they have a food allergy is just important, right? You need to know what to give them, but you also need what to avoid, because you don't want to introduce something that could cause a severe reaction. Anaphylaxis, if we remember from our previous discussions. Okay, so mealtime environments, we're gonna wrap up with this. You want to make sure that you're timing your meals with children so that they will feel hungry. So again, you're thinking about offering small portions throughout the day, but you also need to think about when you're timing those. So if you're planning on lunch at noon, well, offering a snack at 11 or 11:30 is probably not going to leave children feeling very hungry for their lunch. So you either adjust or you need to make the snack earlier. Kind of common sense there. Encourage physical activity. The more they burn those calories and run around, right, the more their body will demand energy, which means they'll feel more hungry. You want to consider the ease of eating food too, especially with young children. So again, if they have a limited time for eating, you're not going to give them a whole mandarin and expect them to peel it and then eat it, right? You're going to have it already peeled, or it's going to be, pre-sliced food that you've bought in a can or a jar or something like that. And just what they can eat based on physically where they're at. Do they have enough teeth to chew that food? Just those are simple things that we can think of that make the eating experience more enjoyable for young children. And you want to give children warnings. Sometimes coming to the table, especially if it's not a pleasant experience for them at home, you want to make it more pleasant when they're in your care. And so warning them 5 to 10 minutes before it's going to be time to take a break from their activity and let them know that it's time to eat gives them a chance to anticipate, prepare mentally for that shift in activity. If they're feeling really kind of involved in what they're doing or possessive of some kind of creation they've built, come up with a plan so they don't feel like they have to abandon it completely and go do something else, because that can make them really kind of struggle to get to the table. You want to maintain regular meal times. So, just like in other ways, children like routine, and knowing when to predict they can eat is helpful. You want to make it as pleasant and a relaxed experience. If you're, sitting down with them, enjoying the food, chatting, that's really helpful. We can see in the picture that teacher is, sitting with the kids in the background there. If you never sit down and you're like bustling around and doing stuff and trying to use that time to just be busy, 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 it just changes the environment. It changes the experience for the child too. You don't want to use food as a reward. Children can develop, and we've probably developed some of these issues for ourselves in our adulthood, but they develop emotional connections to food that are unhealthy, especially if they're continually offered to children. And so if every day you're saying, okay, if you eat your vegetables, I'll give you candy, that just sets up like a weird mental thing that goes on where then that person, as an adult may reward themselves all the time for candy. Like, oh, I got dressed today, I should eat some candy. I made it to work on time today, I'm going to eat some candy. And it's an unhealthy habit to get into. So not using food as a reward for those things that we expect, kind of everyday actions. Now, can we do a treat every once in a while for like a good report card? Well, sure, because report cards only come out 2 or 3 times in a school year. So that's fine. Or, after you have some kind of procedure at the doctor's office and you stop on the way home and get a little treat. Well, that's not something that's happening every day. If it were an everyday occurrence, then a reward might not be helpful. But especially when it comes to trying to get them to eat healthy food, we shouldn't be rewarding them with unhealthy food in order to eat the healthy food. It doesn't work. We want to acknowledge those desirable eating habits. So when we see them being willing to try something new, or we see them sitting more calmly at the table or using their manners or whatever kind of social expectations we have around eating, in addition to trying new foods and being willing to eat some of those things that they sometimes aren't as open to, we can acknowledge that. Children love to be praised for their positive actions, and we should be giving our attention to the positive things more than the negative. And so again, making comments, hey, I really love how you tried that vegetable today. Thanks for eating all of your fruit on your plate today. Also, the environment makes a big impression on children. So this is not something we do necessarily in our homes where we have, small table and chairs for them to sit at. We all sit at the same dining table. But in a classroom where it's sort of supposed to be their space, right? It's supposed to be a place where it feels like it's meant for them. Having table and chairs that fit their size is really important. It makes it easier for them to help with meal preparation, with sitting at the table, makes them comfortable, using certain utensils that are made more for their hands to fit that shape, that also won't break easily. Those are all important things to do. It just makes it feel like it's their space. And involving them in meal preparation. So I had a time when my youngest daughter, I would boil eggs, and I thought this seems like such an easy lunch for her. She wouldn't try it. Then one day I'm cracking an egg, about to peel it, and she said, oh, I want to do that. So I gave her the egg, I let her peel it. She rinsed it off, and next thing you know, she's eating it. Just her getting to be involved really made her that much more willing to try it. Now I can also report that, now a few years later, she doesn't want to eat boiled eggs again. But nonetheless, in that moment, it really worked, and it made me realize I need to try to involve her more because I think she'd be more open to some of these foods. Okay, I keep saying we're going to wrap up, but I really do think I mean it this time. This is the last slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about snacks. I think we talked a little bit about snacks in our nutrition section, but just as a reminder, we want to make sure that snacks are positively contributing to a child's nutrition. It shouldn't be just junk food. I know we sometimes have changed the way we think of a snack in society as like a treat. I think those things are kind of synonymous now, but really what it is it should be, if you're meal planning and thinking ahead, especially when you're working in a preschool or a daycare and you are meal planning and thinking ahead, you should be thinking, okay, what color vegetables are we having with our meal today? I'm going to choose another colored vegetable or fruit for our snack time, along with a different whole grain or something like that, so that it's contributing to other nutrients that that child's getting. They should be nutrient dense foods, so not high fat, not high sugar, because that's just filling them up and it's replacing the opportunity for those essential nutrients that the child could get from a nutrient dense food. It can also be a good time to try new foods. And I don't think we think of that very often, but really if a child is truly hungry in between two meals, then they're probably going to be more willing to try that food. Where at a mealtime, a lot of times you have multiple options. So they'll just pick whatever they like the best and get kind of full on that and leave the rest. But at snack time, when there's only one or two things available, if they are truly hungry, then they'll be willing to try it. And if they don't, well, guess what? They probably didn't need the snack in the first place. So it's okay. And again, avoid letting them eat whenever hungry. So I know we've talked about, letting them choose how much they eat and all those things. And it kind of feels like it's a free for all. They get to do whatever they want. That's not true. The kitchen's not open 24/7. They don't get to eat just whenever they want. They need to be on a routine and there need to be some boundaries. But again, when it is time to eat, that's when they get the choice. But they don't just get to graze all day, right? We're not cattle in a field. So they don't just get to graze all day. Okay. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to reach out and talk with me. And I will check in with you soon.